Hello, it's Werewolf the podcast, and I want to welcome you to the show. We are part of the way through the Gameshow, and hopefully you've listened to the other couple of episodes before this so that you know what's going on, because otherwise you might not, so I do that. Big congratulations goes out to my friend, co-author and brilliant brain, Gregory Alexander Sharp, who is the top of the bestseller list in thriller and suspense short reads. Well done you. Number one, which he genuinely deserves. Brilliant writer. If you've not read his stuff, please go and have a look. You will kick yourself if you don't. Absolutely brilliant descriptive writer. His characters are so alive. So go do it. I'm not jealous that he's winning all these competitions and selling loads of books or anything. That doesn't really hurt my feelings as long as he stays helping us out on this thing. Anyway, thanks very much, Greg. If you want to support the show, there are things in the description where you can support us, like buy us a coffee, or you can just join us on Facebook on the group and have a chat with us, or you can do loads of things. Following us on whatever platform you listen to us on would be good, or anything like that. As always, remember, we love you, thank you, and goodbye. Bosworth.
Number of selfless souls saved,
said Noel to the cheering crowd. Little pile of shite that had spun the wheel was almost dancing with the excitement of not dying instantly.
Only one more step for you, my disgusting little friendly pile of ploppy poo-poo,
said Noel to little sludge demon.
All you have to do now to get your grubby little hands, on the star prize is decide who's going to be the biggest saviour of man.
Said Noel, starting sentence by speaking to Grassgle and ending it by opening it to the crowd. What a pro. He was bloody good at this showbiz nonsense there. The crowd were going mental, and the succubi were not calming them down with the whips. This time, they were literally whipping them into another frothing frenzy. Large cards were held up by some at the succubi towards the audience. Written in a frightening font were words silence or destruction. The audience noise lulled to an excited murmur. Noel moved in towards the little creature that now looked as confused as a piece of shit with 13 eyes and 3 mouths could be.
Well, this is an easy category for you, Grassgle, because our Professor and Will can't really have done very much between them to keep heaven and hell empty and clean, can they?
The audience clapped. Well, they clapped together things like limbs and bits and stuff that could clap. Some had heads and things like heads, and they nodded them. Grassgle's power radiated thought. As Grassgle thought radiated, Noel slowly withdrew from little being. I think the thinking demon was warming up with cognizance and becoming a stinking demon. After a perfect amount of time of leaving creature thinking, long enough to build tension and short enough not to get audiences' tits going, this Noel was so brilliant and professional at his job. He asked Grassgle a question.
Shall we see what the audience thinks? Let's do that. Let's see what the audience thinks.
The dirty diminutive demon nodded something in agreement, and Noel turned to the crowd.
Gallery, can you get the Professor's VT running, please? And Bosworth, it's over to you.
He exclaimed. He was right professional. Oh shit, it's me. Okay. Who saved the mostest soulists? Will it be the father of democracy, the man who did the favour to make inorganic fertiliser with Franz Haber, the dishwasher of Alexander Fleming, the gentleman who helped Edward Jenner, Professor Simon de Montfort? A spotlight swept at Professor as lights went down, and I continued my bloody announcement.
Jesus bloody Christ on a bike. Is there any need to shine that thing directly in my eyes? I may be ostensibly immortal, but I've got bloody retinas, you know, and I could do without them being... Burnt out!
said Professor before I carried on with my announcement. You'll like this, not a lot, as our own Paul Daniels would say. The Professor here has some noteworthy moments in his life, so here are a few for you and the audience to help you make your mind up. Who saved the most souls? Round of applause, drum roll. Firstly, in the 13th century, the Professor was instrumental in taking power from the monarch and giving it back to the people. Well, at the time, the rich people who owned land and owned their own cocks. He is the father of the political system that now gives men, and eventually women, the vote. What's it called? Democracy. The crowd went quiet due to a lack of understanding. I joked mainly for my own amusement, as I knew most of the audience would be too stupid to get it. Sorry, misread that. Not demockery, but democracy. The crowd cheered. Secondly, this was the man who saw that Franz Haber had made a chemical reaction that could produce ammonia gas. That gas, of course, was used initially for killing Allied soldiers in trenches, but with help of Professor, the chemical pathway was changed so that modern inorganic fertilisers were created. More cheers. Meaning, billions did not starve, quite literally to death. Hooray for not starving, quite literally to death. Again, some at crowd cheered, others joined in following the peers. Thirdly, he was the one who noticed that milkmaids... I paused and wished I had eyes because I would have winked at this point, of course. Now then, you lot, no making your own jokes. They weren't laughing, to be honest. As I was saying, he noticed that milkmaids developed resistance against cowpox after they'd contracted the disease once. With this information, he and Edward Jenner created the first scientific idea and the basis for all vaccines. I wonder how many of those milkmaids he personally interviewed for that. The sly dog. Again, laughter. You lot again, making your own bloody jokes. Anyway, with this groundbreaking work, they managed to find a vaccine for smallpox, which on balance, history has looked upon quite favourably. Again, there was cheering. Lastly, he famously took out Alexander Fleming for a pint the Friday night of a weekend. Alexander only went because the Professor was paying. More caned laughter with the aid of the succubi. No, dregs and draginas, he did not only buy him a pint, he bought him a bloody skinful, and as a result of which, they were both so busy queuing for a kebab and puking in bushes that they completely forgot to wash up the petri dishes from a week of bacterial growth. When arriving at work on the Monday, this oversight meant that Alexander saw that some of the dishes had fungal contamination and that the fungus had produced a chemical to kill the bacteria. That chemical was penicillin, I announced. The audience didn't know what to do at that point, but they sort of semi-started cheering. Mostly they'd not understood any of what had just been said, so I carried on. This led to antibiotics. Still nothing. Antibiotics, I said again. It was like hollering into a void. Talk about a tough crowd. Antibiotics have saved a lot of souls, I added. The crowd, now getting the idea, began to cheer again. The spotlight turned to Noel and the demon.
Well, Grassgle, that sounds Petri savvy. I mean, pretty savvy, huh? Get it? Get it? Get it?
He said. Little demon nodded. It nodded. The spotlight flashed across to Will, who was now calm in his seat. I could sense his innate fury, but he sat and gave evil looks evilly to evil beings surrounding him in an evil way. He was right evil.
Let's take it to the psychotic killer, the unempathic thriller, to see what he's done compared to our soul-saving professor. We're going to head over to Bosworth for that again, and I think we've got some VT to run in the background too, so yeah, let's do that, yeah? Bozzy, my old matey mucker, it's over to you!
Said Noel. I replaced Professor's information card with that of the wolves. It had one sentence on it, and it was written in a tiny font as though it was trying to hide. I turned back at card to see if they're out more, but it were blank too. So I went ahead and announced that what the card said to the cheering crowd. And Will was in the army! Bloody hell, I'd never have guessed that he was a real-life dog soldier, I exclaimed. I was trying desperately to make it sound much better than it actually was. The crowd's excitement at this statement fell. The spotlight spun back to Noel and the demon. Noel was picking his nails, not concentrating for a moment. He obviously expected my announcement to take a little bit longer. Someone in gallery must have harumphed in his ear as he returned to being, back to being Noel. And after a second of confusion, he leapt back into that Noel role. Noel role.
Huh? Is that it?
He said, holding his well-formed lug as he looked at stage manager who nodded some of his heads.
Well, okay. I mean, yikes on spikes. That makes it sound a little bit one-sided, doesn't it? Awkward. Well, snot bags and worms, it seems that there's a difficult choice to make between the two here. Or at least, a choice, not necessarily a difficult one. Although, with Grassgle's quite obvious and absolutely literal shit for brains, I suppose anything could happen.
He was bloody trying, he really was, but I'm sure he thought he were lying. He floundered for a moment and referenced the cards that he had in his right hand very briefly.
Okay. Okay. Well then, let's just see what Grassgle thinks.
He turned to Pile, the pile of demon. It looked as confused as a pile of shit could. It brought its arm down to chin, or to a chin, and changed its pile from a look of confusement to a look of concentration, if that's possible.
Right, Grassgle, steady yourself now. This is a tricky one here, a difficult decision, and no mistake,
said Noel. I didn't think the choice was so difficult myself, and neither did most of the audience. Well, members who could at least partially think about the answer anyway.
We're going to give you a countdown, and we're going to ask our revolting audience if any of them has any advice to offer you. So, dear sweet members of the audience, would any of you like to offer up any pearls of wisdom? Don't be shy now. It's not like you're on the telly or anything. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, God, I'm such a card.
The cameras panned to audience. Several limbs were raised by several things. A few of them limbs were not actually their own limbs that they lifted. They must have brought spare ones with them or something. Maybe as a snack. Who knows? Noel stepped forward with mic in hand and ran up one of the stairways between the seats until he got to a Minotaur who was jumping up and down in his seat. He was huge, and creatures and things around him were getting slightly brutalised and bashed by armoured monstrosity as he clumsily tried to get Noel's attention. Noel slid down the row of chairs until he got to the beast.
Hello? And what's your name, you cheeky young fella, you?
He asked the steel bastard.
I'm Slothgut, File Ripper,
said Bull's head. Sharp teeth flashed in a bovine head. That was no fucking herbivore.
Well, good. That's a nice name. It's lovely to meet you, Slothgut. Welcome to the show.
It's called the Gameshow because demons are not that imaginative,
said Noel, maintaining his proper professionality.
Is there anyone you'd like to say hi to out there on all the planes?
He asked.
just me dear old mama,
He said, raising two gigantic thumbs on two gigantic fists and grimacing at camera. No, he weren't grimacing. I think he was actually fucking smiling.
Hey, Mother Throat Ripper. You've got a baby boy to be proud of here. Yeah,
said Noel to camera.
thanks for that, She loves you, Noel.
Said the beast with an happy face.
That's sweet but unsurprising. I am, after all, the housewife's choice.
He winked at camera and smiled a smile that could have, had an onomatopoeic ting come with it. This drew an audible sigh from most at female-ish and a few at male-ish things in attendance. Aye.
Aha! So, getting back to the situation at hand, who do you think has saved the most souls in his life? Remember what was said about both of them?
Well, I've met the professor before, and he was dead gutting me. I knows he's been round for a right long time, so I'm reckon it's him, minute.
The Minotaur said.
I can see you thinking there. He has indeed been around for centuries. Get it? Centuries. See what I did there? Oh, forget it. You lot. Honestly, what am I going to do with you?
Said Noel, reaching up on tiptoes to pat the creature's shoulder armour. All audience was in fits of laughter.
I don't like centaurs, Noel.
Said Minotaur.
Oh, blimey. For a half-man, half-bull, you're a complete bore.
Minotaur sat back in his seat with another thumbs up at the camera as he mouthed, "I love you, Mum." He retook his seat carefully and some of those seats around him that were already occupied. It was a bit of a mess, really, to be honest.
Anyone else? Anyone else out there in our audience?
Asked Noel. Again, crowd went wild and Noel followed the spotlight to a tiny sparkle from a seat. Camera focused in and on the sparkle, and it turned out to be a sparkling tiny fairy, a teeny tiny beautiful young girl with long silken green hair and butterfly wings on her back. She sat and, well, she sparkled. She's a fucking fairy. Noel arrived there with his mic and scores his way to Fairy's seat.
Hi. Let's find out what you think.
Said Noel.
Can I ask your name?
Hi, I'm Fairy Foxglove.
Came the song-like reply.
Do you want to say hello to anyone?
Noel asked her.
I would like to thank all the little children of the world and remind them that their belief in fairies keeps us alive.
She piped. I believe in fairies. I believe in fairies, shouted crowd. Crowd started a round of applause. And some took a moment to wipe a sentimental tear from their eyes while simply saying the words lovely to themselves. It's bloody fairies, isn't it?
Wow. Well, that was a nice thing to say.
Started Noel, wiping a fake tear from his own eye. But Fairy butted in and continued.
And Hercules, the exotic dancing centaur down at the Big Bulge Club. Keep it up, you huge dick.
Noel turned off the microphone and moved it away from its slavering Fairy. Camera stayed on her for some time and she did some grinding and rubbing and thrusting. The thing she was doing would scar tiny minds of those little kids she'd just spoken to. It'd scar them for fucking life. It scarred me.
Whoa, that's the problem with believing in fairies, I find, ladies and gentlemen. A small body to hold a lot of personality. Guys in VT, can you cut that bit out, please? Just disgusting.
Crowd laughed at his unprecedented witticism.
Okay, Foxglove, back to the game. Which of these gentlemen do you think has saved the most souls? And no more mention of centaurs. You don't want to upset Slothgut over there now, do you?
He asked, returning microphone to now still fair and becoming all serious and stuff.
Well, my mother always told me to judge with my gut. You know, always go with that gut feeling.
She very sweetly and guiltily said, Noel brought Mike back to his own mouth.
Your mother sounds like a wise woman.
He told her. She nodded her head really hard.
But I think that's a complete load of twaddle. I tend to judge with my genitals, and that Will has them frothing out.
Noel ripped his mic away and turned it off again, looking at the camera with a slightly embarrassed shrug, while horny little fairy raged on behind him.
Ooh. Well, thank you, Fairy Foxglove. I think. Ew.
Said Noel, turning his mic back on, getting up and walking away.
Okay, that's one vote for each of our villainous victims.
He announced, scratching his head and looking at the frothing fairy. I think she even frightened Gorman a bit, you know. Spotlight flashed back to a blinking pile of poo that had to make its decision as Noel walked back to it. He soon arrived and went to tentatively put his arm around the pile and brought microphone closer to to two of them, as though he was being like conspiration at one-wick demon.
Right, Grassgle. If you get this right, you win the star prize. So we're going to set the clock and give you time to think of your answer.
Timer started and the crowd started yelling for either one of the two of the terrorists in thrones. It was right interesting. The crowd was now kind of split right evenly, which was worrying. Some were shouting for Will, some for Professor, some just shouted random things that they just wanted to shout. Maybe some of them only knew one or two words, who knew? Little demon who had whittled himself earlier was yelling, "Custard!" randomly for some reason. Timer stopped and the audience fell into silence. Noel turned towards a little sludge demon and all focus in the hall went to the little being. I could see that it was feeling embarrassed. It farted in fright and looked ashamed.
Ooh, that's rather a niche response. Is that your final answer?
Said Noel, taking piss a little.
But seriously, who do you think is the saviour of souls?
He asked the splodge. The demon paused in as close to a quandary as a demon can possibly get.
I'm going to have to rush you, my friend.
He told Demon, turning and winking to the camera. He was so witty.
I think it is the Professor's.
Are you 100% sure? Huh?
Asked Noel, brilliantly bringing more tension to Rome. Poor wee pile of poo looked little and confused and somewhat circumspect.
F,
said the sludge demon. He closed all of his eyes and sort of shrank back, waiting for answer. His 12-fingered hand having many of its fingers crossed, sometimes several times.
Okay. So come on, guys. Let's keep it calm for the big reveal. Over to Paul Daniels and the lovely Debbie McGee.
Well, by Jiminy, what a difficult decision here, eh, Debbie?
He told the crowd.
Let's have a see of what we can see.
A human was lowered onto the stage. Well, he was tied, arms and legs outstretched on what like an iron pentagram that dangled from sky by invisible things that dangling him right just there.
Well, that's magic.
It were a young man. He was gagged and bound and in a semi-state of disrobe. As the pentagram finally reached the ground facing the audience, man on it woke up and started to struggle with his bonds. The gag did its work and the words that he uttered were muffled, but it was easy to see that he was bloody terrified. The beautiful Debbie McGee walked up to him and did that weird two-arms magician assistant stance, 2 arms and too much leg, showing the man on the wheel-like pentagram. Paul Daniels walked across the stage. His eyes flashed red briefly as he arrived at the man.
Don't worry, my friend. It will hurt. A lot, actually. I'd like to say not a lot, but that would be a lie.
A magician's table appeared at a wave command from the little man in a puff of smoke. The lovely Debbie McGee walked over and presented table in the same manner as she presented pentagram earlier. On table were 2 black arm-length rubber gloves and a black knife. A knife is as black as pitch it was. It was really black. I mean, as black as you can get black. You get it. I'm talking about black as black can be. No, blacker than that. Anyway, back to Nightmare. The magician raised his arms and looked at the lovely Debbie McGee. She lifted one of the gloves, showing it to the crowd in a very sort of magician-y assistant sort of way before putting it onto Daniel's arms. She then repeated the whole process with the other one. Paul Daniel stood there all through this. Then lovely Debbie McGee walked forward to the table once more and massively mind shock. She touched the table as if trying to find something on it and brought her hands to her mouth. She shook her head and walked off stage left. This was all part of that classic comedy of this duo. The Paul Daniels acted as if he was confused and bored, pulling a watch from his pocket of his waistcoat to check the time before being relieved when his wife returned to the stage carrying a leather apron in one hand and a clear visor in the other. The apron was large and thick and covered in unknowable stains that had been created by... I don't really want to know. The man hung behind them all through this, while his eyes was following them with his growing terror. The apron was deftly put onto Paul Daniels as he stood there and visor was added. As she walked away, she lifted a finger to her mouth, looking confused for a minute as though she'd forgotten something important, and went back. On arriving back, she lifted visor and gave the little man a little peck on his little lips before closing visor and wiggling off in like a right provocative manner. The crowd went wild as Daniels said,
The lovely Debbie McGee, ladies and gentlemen.
A deep, tension-filled tune started as the showmanship began. He reached for a blade in his left hand while taking a silk handkerchief from the pocket of his apron. He turned at Fruit Visor, gave the crowd a wink, then looked at both things in his hands, one after the other. He suddenly threw up handkerchief into the air, where it slowed and floated before. He grabbed a white rabbit from behind his back and removed his head with a blade before the handkerchief hit the table. His eyes were full of bestialed fury as he did so. Blood gushed. It was, brutally done. He laughed.
You didn't like that, eh, Mr. Twitchy Nose, you bastard?
As he chucked the bits of the rabbit to the floor, unceremoniously, the lovely Debbie McGee came jogging back onto the stage and stopped at the table, picking up the handkerchief and dipping it in the still warm blood and wiping it on her face before turning and leaving the stage with a little kick. The crowd went wild. After the right amount of applause, the Paul Daniels held his hands up for quiet as he moved to the next part of the process. Once room quieted and got quiet, he continued. He brought blade forward and touched the tip with a gloved finger, feigning its sharpness. He then turned to the man suspended behind him. Man was doing all he could to get away from the diminutive, bloodthirsty magician. He was trying to crawl his way up pentagram using his vertebrae alone. Then suddenly the blade swept across his belly and the Paul Daniels plunged both his arms into the guts of the now dying, struggling man. Blood fountained to the floor and man died, a horrendously muffled cry leaving his lips behind gag. As the man went, the Paul Daniels had found what he rummaged for and turned to the audience with a small box in his hands, a small wooden box that didn't have a single drop of blood on it. He carefully placed it on the table and disrobed himself of his gloves, visor and apron into a bag that the lovely Debbie McGee had held open for him. Before leaving, his glamorous assistant picked up blade from the table and held it in a tantalising manner before licking its length and looking at the crowd with bloodlust-filled eyes. I frightfully noticed that the tongue that licked the blade was forked and reptile-like. Then she coquettishly, is that the word? Thanks. Coquettishly ran from stage to a round of applause. Suddenly, the entire studio was plunged into darkness. A spotlight picked out a box on the table and expanded to include magician. He opened the box and pulled out an envelope from it and took his time opening it, building that bloody tension even more.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get the answer to this simple question. Are we going to like it? Probably not.
A screen lit up behind him where Pentagram had been.
Souls saved for the Professor. We have 2, 7, 8.
He paused as numbers appeared on screen in sequence.
If we stop there, that's not a lot, eh, ladies and gentlemen?
He conspirationally told audience.
Luckily, there's a lot more numbers here. Well, not a lot, but enough of a lot.
He turned back to the screen and continued.
So we've already had 2, 7 and 8. And to that, let's add 2, 9
And another 2!
Audience cheered,
Oh no, that's not it, ladies and gentlemen. We've got more.
and he kept going.
006!
He paused and crumpled note in his hand.
That's 2,078,292,006 souls saved by the Professor.
Crowd went utterly batty. Some with joy, some with anger, some with custard. The spotlight moved back to Noel.
That's a lot of souls, Grassgle.
He told Little Demon.
Are you still happy with your choice? Will it be higher or lower?
Little Demon looked confused and thoughtful at the same time. An amazing feat for a many-eyed piece of shit. The crowd was shouting out their own thoughts. Higher, higher, lower, lower, custard.
Do you want to change your mind?
He asked the quivering fecal pile. Demon listened to the crowd. How it listened, I have no idea. There were no ears there, and many emotions ran across the poop pile's face until he settled on her.
Nopsies!
Okay, back to the magician with the evil volition. It's Mr. Paul Daniels.
Light shone back on Little Man. He opened another envelope and perused it with great scrutiny. His eyes were lifted from paper to meet the audience's eyes. Well, the audience's too many eyes, if you know what I mean.
Oh, you're going to not like this. Or are you?
Screen relit and he turned right back to it.
Are you ready, ladies and others?
The crowd yelled their approval. Paul Daniel let crowd fall into a murmuring quiet before he continued.
Well, I'm glad that our sacrifice, Timothy, had the guts to give us the answer.
The audience broke into more laughter and he waited professionally for quiet to come once more.
Okay, here we go. Will's number.
Again a pause for building tension.
Here are the numbers. 8!
Flashed up next to Wolf's name. Dramatic pause.
And a 2!
He stopped, turning to the crowd and folding paper. Gasps were heard from the crowd. Cheers followed and sighs. Little pile of shit Demon was effervescing with excitement. His many mouths smiled. He were fucking ecstatic. Focus went back to Magician.
That's 8.2.
Again, crowd went mad. It was even worse than they thought possible. 8.2 souls? Pathetic. Will in his seat looked confused. The Professor was all nodding and smiles.
8.2 billion. And ongoing.
Finished Magician. Crowd went silent with shock.
Oh. Well, it's over to Bosworth to make some sense out of all of this. Bosworth, it's over to you.
Said Noel. Well, that was a shocker. After all the souls saved by Professor, we find that our Will has saved all the living souls and all those to come from now on. He saved all the souls so they can make their own choice to be good or to be bad. And here is how. On operation at the end of the Cold War, he managed to intercept information from Russian Northern Fleet that helped the Allied nations divert a strike in the Baltics. And I tell you, ladies, you don't want a strike in the Baltics. Laughter. I was right funny. That strike could have led to and would have led to nuclear war and end human race as well as almost all life on this planet for thousands of years. So, it turns out that Will has saved every human being that lives and will ever live.